Now, on to today's topic. The topic for today is leaving your legacy. As we age, we begin thinking more and more about what we leave behind. This can include many different categories: financial, social, emotional, stuff, and even more. One major piece to keep in mind, though, our everyday interactions with others will determine how we're remembered. And today we're going to hear from our guest speaker about the different ways we can determine the legacy we leave for our family and for our community. I'm very honored to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Perry Hammock. He's the president of Vitruvian LLC. And Perry has spent decades helping individuals create and sustain caring legacies. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Perry.
Thanks, Sean. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This maybe is a little bit of a departure for Town Hall because I'm not going to specifically focus on items of interest specifically for low vision. I'm pre-glaucomic, so I fit in with the category of having some vision problems. But I want to talk to you today about the whole concept of legacy. I have a big birthday coming up. I'm going to be 70 in 2 weeks. And I find I've been thinking more about the concept of legacy. So let me share my screen and we'll get on with the presentation. Take me a second to figure this out. Here we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. It looks beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you so much. You're too kind. And when we're gone, the only thing that will is the love that we share and the way that we care when we're gone. There we go. I'm having a little technical trouble here. I apologize for that. So today will be a little different. I kind of like to have fun, so you'll hear some music. Maybe you'll remember some of it, know some of it. If not, I'll tell you at the end who they all are, and whoever gets the most of them right, write them down. Sean will send you a lollipop. I want to give a little disclaimer. I am not an attorney. I'm not a financial advisor. I found as I got a little bit older that there was a lot of information I didn't have about retiring and thinking about retiring and about aging and about family. So I've started doing some of these seminars just as kind of pro bono, because I think it's important for all of us to think about, you know, how we age and what happens when we age. So what I'm presenting today is just food for thought. I like to say how you care to dine and when you dine is up to you. But I will try to present some kind of guidelines I think are important. So the concept of legacy, I think people think too much about legacy being money you leave to your kids. Legacy is really bigger than that. Legacy is how you want to be remembered, that line in the sand you might draw, or where your footprints go. The author Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said and what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel." And to me, that's the main concept of legacy. It's another way of asking, you know, how do I want people to think about me? How I made them feel when I was around them. And so when you think about that, you know, it's something that's fluid, that can be changed, that can grow with you. I bet you know this song. Full of fun seems to be the idea. Yes, the good life. It makes you hide all the sadness you feel. So I think you can plan your legacy just like you plan for your financial freedom and for how you wish to live at your end of days. And it's part of that good life. Now, I think you can figure out a number of ways to have your legacy. So you can go out like a dinosaur, you know, walking in your own path until the meteor strikes, and then you're just gone, and maybe will be discovered 1,000,000 years from now. And that's one way. Or You can leave something behind that's magical that people will remember forever. And it doesn't have to be, Ramses the second tomb. So, but it can be something that is important to you and important to your family and important to your community. And that's what I think is important. I use these pictures in my presentation so I can justify tax deducting all of my travels, by the way. But one of the things about legacy you want to make sure is that people remember the good things. So these are my two grandchildren. Willa on the left is 2.5 now. Owen on the right is 5.5. And this was when Willa was just a little over 1. And the other day, Owen said to me, Tipper, I'm Tipper to my grandchildren, Tipper, do you remember when we played in the water at Tamaya, which is a resort that we'd gone to? And I thought, for a 5-year-old to remember something that happened 1.5 years ago, it must have made an impression on him. So they'd never seen hand-actuated faucets before. Now, we were in a restroom, of course, and we could have left, but Tipper, being the playmate that he is, we stayed in for 25 minutes. My daughter was frantic, thinking something had happened to us all in the restroom because we were making memories. And here's a 5-year-old that remembers that. So part of my Tipper legacy with him will be playing in the water at Tamaya. So your legacy will vary too. If you think about it, and I go through the list of people that I know, my colleagues, my spouse, my daughter, we have 1 child, the rest of my family, friends, neighbors, grandkids, I may have a different legacy to them. I may make them feel differently. And so one of the things that I've done, and I encourage everybody to do, is to think about the groups of people in your life and then write down how you think that they might remember you. If someone went up and said, hey, do you know Perry? Yeah, what do you think about him? Well, I think he's the life of the party. I think he's my next door neighbor, but he's really the faux grandpa to my children. How do you wish to be remembered? Because you can always change this too. So these are our next door neighbor kids. And to them, we're Mr. Perry and Miss Chris. We're not Tipper and Cece like we are to our grandchildren, but to them, they consider us to be their faux grandparents. And so that has a whole kind of milieu around it of how we make them feel because of how we've interacted with them. And of course, what's most important to me as far as legacy is what my family think of me: spouse, daughter, son-in-law, grandchildren. But those other groups that I mentioned are really important too, as you think about that whole concept of legacy. So I'll be 70 in 2 weeks. I was in graduate school in 1975. On Facebook, I found my major professor who was retired from Rutgers University now in New Jersey. And I sent him a note. He sent me a note back. Oh, yeah, Perry, I remember you. You were always the good student with the long hair. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that's kind of my legacy to him. Now I'm the old guy who doesn't study with hardly any hair. So that legacy has continued for almost 50 years. And so I sent him some pictures and some notes and said, oh, no, this is who I am today, so that he might have an updated idea of who I am and what I'm doing. Biggest thing that I think affects your legacy is time. So the picture on the left of me in the striped shirt, that's my daughter, who is now 35. And the picture on the right is Owen, who's now 5. So the funny thing I like to point out to people is if you look real closely, babies tend to be the same, but boy, do I change over that period of time. I've inherited a lot of forehead over these years. The glasses are a little less funky, and the stripes have changed into a subtle black. But as time changes, your legacy, how you might be remembered, will change as well. But you can always change it. Now, it's not as easy as Ebenezer Scrooge, who found out that he could change his entire legacy in one night. But I think if you think to yourself, how will people remember me? And I'm the grumpy old person down the hall, then maybe there's some things that can be done to change it. I recommend starting today. And first of all, to write kind of a personal mission statement. I hope that people will remember me as, and write those things down. with keywords or descriptors. The best trivia player, funny, knowledgeable, kind, caring, best coffee maker in town, whatever it might be, and then assign those to different groups of people in your life, and then see how those fit together. And if they don't seem to be meshing, then we can set about changing that. How? I think one way is to volunteer, to be out there with other people. As we age, one of the things that happens to us is we tend to pull back more. But there's always a way to remember that there are people who are a little worse off than we are. Yes, we have low vision in one way or the other, to one extreme or another. There are people who are blind. Yes, we may not be of rich financial resources. There are people who are poor. We have lived a life with blessings. There are others that maybe need to remember how their blessings are counted. So if we interact more with other people by volunteering, by doing presentations, I'm going to start. I've finally reached the age where I'm going to start doing travel logs of my trips to people in nursing homes and other facilities who don't get a chance to get out, because that's a way I can share, hopefully, the world with other people. To me, that's important. Travel is a big part of my life. So how does it fit with you? Can be 1,000 different ways, but you'll find that particular place. And in that, we tell our story, what I've lived through, what I've learned, how I made things work, how I worked with my challenges and helped overcome them. Because in that, we can shine a light for other people. We can give them an idea. We can give them a strategy, a set of tactics. And I think that's part of the legacy that we can leave behind. That's who I am. 1,000%. That's who I am. That's who I am. So legacy also is kind of a habit. So I think it's always important, like with any habit we might be establishing, is to remind ourselves on a regular basis of what that legacy is. Here are some things I think we should all do. Before you forget to do it, do a documentary. You can do it online. You can do it in tape. You can type it. You can record it with other people. You can share with others about your life and about what you've learned and about the lessons that were important to you. I think a big thing, I've done this for both of my parents who are now passed, and now for Poppy, my father-in-law, who's 99 and a half, is we've put together like a photo reminder, a photo life, if you will. And we placed it in all of their rooms and let them remember those things that they've told us stories about. It also becomes an important part at that final end of days as we're reminding people of our legacy. But also those photo reminders are good for us. So we have our big photo screen in the kitchen where we have our dinner. And we'll always have dinner conversation based on what picture has randomly popped up. And it's always something of import, or we wouldn't put it on there, that reminds us of great stories and great times. The other thing I think is important is for all of us to have that bucket list. My wife and I each have ours. We have our top 10. We have them on the refrigerator. We mark things off as we get to them or decide that they're not important. We move things up and change things around. But I think that bucket list gives us things to look forward to. And that also helps us remind us of what our legacy can be by what we wish to accomplish. And it doesn't have to be travel. It doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be activity. It can really be most anything. But it's important to have a bucket list because it gives us things to look forward to. So, okay, so that kind of sets up for me how we talk about our legacy. Now let's talk about leaving a legacy, because that's, again, what a lot of people think about. One of the things that people leave behind are things. And if you notice that one thing Americans tend to have is stuff. So if we're going to leave things behind, I can tell you lots of family stories. For example, my daughter, when I retired in 2014, one of the things my wife and I had said we always want to do is make sure we had the posters off the wall. So we picked up a few little pieces of Indiana artists. I'm from Indianapolis, and we have. And so when our daughter and son-in-law moved back to Indiana, we said, hey, Emily, maybe it's time. You want to start taking some of the pictures, to put on the wall of your new house? And she's like, Dad, I don't want any of them. I'm like, oh. She goes, no, they're not my style. I said, well, how about, is there any like we have some family furniture and things like that? She goes, no, I like mid-century modern. Your stuff's all old and clunky. So first of all, we have to make sure they want them. And in many cases, you may find the next generation doesn't want our stuff, just like maybe we didn't want some of the stuff of our parents. So before you give things to people, make sure they want them. I know too many people of my generation who are, well, what's that you have out there in the garage? That's something that, was a family heirloom and I didn't know what else to do with it. And now I've got it and I don't know what to do with it. So it's in the garage. Eventually it will all end up at Goodwill. So maybe bypass all that and just give it to Goodwill in the first place. Remember that if you do give people things, and sometimes this is jewelry, if you give a ring to your daughter and then find out she has the stone reset and puts it in her ear, you really don't have anything to say about that. So remember that once you give something, it's a gift. Gifts can't be modified or taken back. No strings attached. So if you do give something away, even an heirloom, you have to understand that the next generation, those people you give it to, may see it a little bit differently than you do. I think the biggest thing about leaving things is dividing amongst your family. In that respect, I'm blessed. I have one child, so Emily gets it all. But if you have 2 or 3 children, how you divide things up can sometimes cause some stress in the family. How you decide, is it just because somebody likes something? Well, I tend to like the things that are more expensive. So then somebody else gets something that's cheap, and it can be an issue. Think through it, do it with some care, do it with love. I had one friend he knew that his children all wanted several things that were in the house. So what he did was he put them all up for auction and said, whoever wants it most can buy it. And then the money that came in from that auction amongst the family was divided up amongst the children. So then nobody could complain. They all had their chance to get it, but that's maybe a little bit extreme, but think about it. The goal when we pass away is to make sure that everyone we love will still have Thanksgiving dinner together. And sometimes the division of things can be one of those sticking points with the generation that follows us. Yeah, man, that's the good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about money. So, hopefully we'll all have something to leave behind for those that we care about and to the community at large. With kids, there's some questions sometimes about how much is too much. I think there is important. My wife and I have made our plans where a certain percentage of our estate will go to charity and some will go to the kids. There's generation skipping. I hope by the time I'm gone that our kids are well enough established that we can fund college education for the grandchildren, help relieve our children of that expense. We're kind of big on funding experiences. So, we're spending a lot of their inheritance. We're going to Puerto Rico next week with the kids and grandkids. And that's money they won't have when we pass away, but we hope that it's a good investment in their futures and showing them what we can do together as a family. And just like stuff, sometimes money doesn't get divided up the same. You may have children with different needs who have bloomed earlier or later, and how you treat them maybe something that's important to think about. And I'll talk about in a moment about the concept of leaving some information in your will that may help with that. And that's to leave a charitable legacy. Like I said, it's an important part of our life. I think most of us have been touched by charities that we've supported consistently. Maybe we've supported significantly, but we hope that they'll continue to provide those services. If nothing else, as I like to tell people that I work with, it takes a charity 2 or 3 years to replace an ongoing donor. So maybe in your final will, you leave them enough money to at least let them replace you in the donor population. Or maybe you'll want to fund a program that was important to you or help with an endowment. There are a number of ways of doing it, but I think it's with organizations that you think are doing significant work that you have a real interest in. It's the kind of cause or particular organization that you find to be important and that will do a good job with your philanthropy. If you do leave a legacy, it's easy to do in your will. It can be an amount. As I mentioned, what my wife and I have done is set aside a percentage of our net estate, meaning after taxes and obligations, that will go to charity. It may be more when we go, it may be less, but then that way it will be consistent with how we divide it up in a proportional way. Also, sometimes a legacy, like for some of those assets that the kids don't want. So for our few pieces of Indiana art, those are things that we will specifically donate in our will, because why burden our daughter with having to sell them or do whatever? She can keep the cash. We'll help give some of those assets that would easily be converted to cash to a charity that we like, who can use those for to benefit their purposes too. So sometimes that can make it. One of the things I tell people that you need to think about, if you do, well, before you think about that, do you realize that probably the richest you'll ever be is the year after you die? For those of us who have pre-tax retirement plans, IRAs, 403Bs, 403Cs, money that was put in pre-tax will be taxed upon your death. When it comes out, it will be taxed unless you give it to charity. So if you're going to leave a gift to charity, make sure you do that from your pre-tax accounts. Those accounts you have in your checking account or an investment account that were done post-taxation, meaning you already paid tax on that money, a Roth IRA, other things like that, leave those to the kids. But if you make a gift to charity from your pre-tax accounts, it will not be taxed. So the charity can get more money, and you'll actually be able to leave more money then to your heirs by making those gifts to charity from pre-tax accounts. And your IRA administrator would know the language you need to use. That's very simple. Just make sure in your will it says these gifts to charity should be made from my pre-tax IRA accounts. But that's an important thing to remember. One of the questions people ask is, if I leave money behind, should I create an endowment or should I not? There are pluses and minuses. Endowments technically will last forever. You give a sum to a charity, they will invest it and spend from the proceeds, hopefully accounting for inflation. Generally, it's paying out between 4 or 5% per year and will go on for a long period of time. The cons against it are, there are fees charged against it every year. And what if your charity finds that there's a higher and better need 10, 20, 30 years from now? Unless you build in some flexibility, then that money will have to be used for that purpose, which may or may not be valid. If they do find a cure for glaucoma, and I've left all my money to an endowed fund just specifically for glaucoma, then the charity has an issue, may have to go back to a probate judge or something and say, we can't use this money. So make sure you have pop-offs if you do endow it, so that there's a way that it can be used for the highest and best purposes that you're trying to achieve. So one of the things I think is nothing to think about is giving while you live. I mentioned that we're taking all the kids on a vacation, and that's part of our giving while we live. And we want to tell them this is part of our legacy. This is what we're leaving behind for you. We're just kind of doing it now. And I think that if we see, like with my daughter, it turned out one of the biggest inspirations in her life was the travel that we did. So we wanted to offer that same opportunity to the grandchildren who don't have that opportunity right now with the way their finances are. So if we can do that, then we consider that to be part of our legacy. It's just when you do it and when you don't do it. The advantage of doing it while you're still alive is you get to have fun with it. You get to see the benefit pretty immediately. And again, if that's an important part of your life, then I think that's a good way to share. Now, I mentioned earlier that we talk about if you find that there may be some strife over how you divide your assets or the money you leave behind. I'm a big fan of the concept of the ethical will. An ethical will is a companion to your legal will. So you should all have, if you don't have, please get your will and testament in order. If you've done one several years ago, I'm speaking to myself here, you need to go back and review that to make sure it's still valid if things have changed in your life. Everybody needs to have a will. The ethical will is a document or a video that you can put in the desk drawer, if you will, with the actual legal will that may explain why you're doing what you're doing in your will. If, for example, you have earmarked one heirloom for one child, why are you doing that? So the other kids will understand. If you're leaving money to this charity or that charity, to prevention of blindness, for example, why am I doing that? And what do I hope will be accomplished? Because they may get to oversee, to see the benefits of that endowment or that fund as life goes by. It also helps to transfer your family values to the next generation. So they remember for the Hammocks, what's important to us is to give back to the communities from which we've benefited, to help those who are less successful than we are, and to provide a source of inspiration. oh yeah, that makes sense. No wonder mom and dad did this or did that. So a big fan of an ethical will. There's even a website called everplans.com where you can kind of go in and play with your own, but it's an easy thing to do either in writing or just do it on your phone and save the file and put it with your legal last will and testament. Okay, last but not least, eventually we're all gone. And when that happens, there's one last event. When my mom passed away, my dad preceded my mom in death by about 10 years. My mom was 10 years younger. So when mom passed away, I have one sister, and I said to my sister, well, we get to go through this all again. And she goes, no, it's all figured out. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, I got the book. And what my mom had done was go through. She had prepaid for her funeral, but she had gone through and done all the planning for her funeral. The music she wanted, the readings, the displays, what things she thought were important to her. And the funny thing was we didn't open it until she had passed away. But the first thing we did was to go to the funeral home and to talk to the funeral director. And he said, okay, we got to pick out, the casket. He goes, oh no, your mom did all that. And I can promise you that my sister and I, neither of us would have picked out a lavender casket for my mom. Matter of fact, I lived with my mom for 60 years. I didn't know lavender was her favorite color. She didn't flaunt it, but that was her favorite color. So we learned things even in those final moments. But the blessing to us was it was my mom leaving a final statement about her legacy by the things that she shared and the readings that she wanted, even the flowers, because she spoke in her final document to all of us about why those things were meaningful to her and really helped cement, I think, for us as the kids and the rest of the family, what her legacy was going to be to us. Well, that was all pretty heavy stuff. Let's lighten up here for just a second. You ever just go out and dance around in front of colored lights? Owen does. And part of the whole concept of legacy is the layers like you see with Owen. So sometimes Owen is white, pink, blue, yellow, and I think we're that way too. So as we're looking at legacy, although we talk about things like death and departure and leaving behind, remember that it's all really positive. We go out on a good note, and that makes people smile. That's my goal in life, is to have people smile when they remember me. That's my mission statement.
The autumn drift by my window. The autumn leaves.
I fear that one of my legacies will be that I talk too fast, and I apologize for that. People from the Midwest aren't supposed to be the fast talkers, but I inherited some sort of East Coast bug, I think, in my life, because I tend to talk way too fast. At the end of the day, talking about legacy, your legacy is really for the living. Your legacy is to transfer your values, is to provide opportunity to make a lasting change, to provide for a better quality of life, whether that's specifically for an heir, whether that's through a community organization, whether that's for that bigger community. Your legacy oftentimes is how and what you give back. And you don't have to be rich to do this. Legacy is also for us. It's for our mental, our spiritual, our physical health, because as we think about how we wish to leave behind, also gives us the energy and the strength to make those changes that we need to, and to do the right thing, which sometimes is harder than ever in these days and times. So remember that about legacy. Because at the end of the day, legacy is love. It's expression of love for other people. And when those chairs are empty on the beach, somebody's going to remember this is Jean's this is Jean's patio. Jean has been gone for 15 years, but Jean will always be remembered as this being her patio and her view overlooking Lake Michigan. And everybody that goes there for generations will remember that as Jean's patio. So that's an important small legacy that can be left behind. And hey, I got time for questions, but thanks for listening. The biggest thing is thank you for letting me deduct a trip to Michigan, a trip to Egypt, a trip to Albuquerque, and a trip to Paris by using the pictures in this slideshow. So I'll just open it up, I guess. If anybody has any questions or comments, please.
All right, Perry, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I know I learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did too. We do have time now for some Q&A. So again, everyone, to unmute yourself, there is a microphone-shaped button at the bottom left you can press. You can also do Alt plus the letter A, as well as if you're on the Mac, it's Command-Shift-A, and if you're on the phone, it's *6.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This is was very timely for me because I'm in your age group. Actually, have a couple of years on you, and also a Rutgers graduate. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and you gave some very, very good tips. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Other questions from folks? We still have plenty of time if you have any. You can also type it in the chat box if you have questions.
Sorry, I lost me. There I am.
Hi, this is Keeloff. Hi, Sean and Terry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to know, how do I find somebody that can help me write a will? I'm catching up with you in age. I'll catch up with you very shortly, and I'm a bit nervous that I haven't got around to making a will and all that stuff, and maybe even a living will. I mean, I know that every year my eyes are getting a bit worse. At some point, I might need help managing stuff. Where do I even begin?
Well, I think, like I said, I think anybody over about 12 should have a will. If you have any assets that you would like to have something happen to in a particular way, you need a will. The sad thing is, if you don't have a will, when you become incapacitated or pass away, the state that you live in and the federal government has one written for you, will decide what happens to your assets. So having one, I think, is important. How to get one, and it's a ways away, but August is National Do Your Will Month. And there's generally a number of organizations that will provide kind of meet a lawyer, and they might help you with a simple will. There are some great the thing about a will is I recommend you see an attorney. I recommend that because can you do your own? If you go Googling around online, you'll find things say, hey, do your simple will here. And remember, it's about as trustworthy as anything on the internet. Does it work with the state of Virginia? Does it work with the District of Columbia? Does it work with Maryland? There is some state law. So I recommend seeing an attorney in your state. You can look a couple of ways. You can look at should be a listing. If you just search for estate planning attorneys in what your town is, you'll probably get some listings of attorneys. Here's the kind of the pro tip. An attorney's going to charge you by the hour to do your will. You need to know when you go in, all the assets that you have, who you want to take care of, what you want to take care of, what you want to leave to charity, where they are, all that disposition, because they'll sit and do it with you, but you're going to be on the clock for the whole time. There's a wonderful on AARP's website, the American Association of Retired People, and you don't have to be a member to go there. If you go in there and search for talk to my attorney, you'll find some like a sheet that you can fill out that will help you get prepared. And so if you walk in to sit down with the attorney and you have all your ducks in a row, here's my retirement accounts, here's my bank accounts, here's all the assets that I have. Here are the list of heirs or friends, assigns, charities that I wish to care for, and how I kind of have in my mind to divide it up. Then an attorney will be able to help you in a much shorter fashion, a much shorter period of time. And it should be a relatively inexpensive kind of process.
Okay.
Does that help at all?
I think so. Yeah, I got to get going with this, so I appreciate it a lot. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot, and thanks for
Yeah.
your presentation. I enjoyed it and appreciate it, and made me think about things that I want to do
Yeah. You
with
know, one
my
of the funny
kids.
things about us, since we're in that sort of same age group, most all of us on the phone, is there's a couple of things about us boomers. We think we invented cool. So we're all sort of James Dean wannabes. And the second thing is we don't want to think about, we're never going to die. That's kind of part of the
Right.
deal. And American culture is more specifically that way than any other culture in the world. So other people find it odd that people don't plan ahead. I mean, if you go, I was just in Egypt, and man, those people planned ahead. As soon as you were king, you started building your tomb. In
Yeah.
America, a full 50% of Americans die intestate, meaning without a valid will. And what that means at the best case is more work for the heirs and assigns that you have. They die without I had a friend that just found out that he was the executor of a will for a shoestring relative that never told him that he was going to be the executor. He had no idea where any of his assets were or what he wanted to have done with them because they didn't want to talk about it. So part of my, kind of evangelism work, if you will, in telling these stories is it's okay to think about it. And like I tell the story about my mom, what a blessing that was for my sister and I, who always get along. We wouldn't have fought over anything. Plus my mom was in long-term care for 5 years and spent every penny she and dad ever had on long-term care. So, but for if the kids, I talked to a friend who has one of 5 children. They were raised Catholic. Only one of them is still Catholic. One's a Buddhist. One's an agnostic. One became a Methodist. One married into a Protestant family. And he said, if mom hadn't laid out what she wanted to have happened, each one of us would have had something different in mind based on how we had evolved in our faith journeys. And it might not have been anything that anybody wanted. And we would have argued about it. So taking care of those things, I think, is really important for your kids, for your heirs, for your assigns. And only about 6% of wills have a provision for charity. And that's part of what I encourage people to do too, is think about giving something back. We've all benefited from it. Sometimes we forget, but we've all benefited from our life and our community. I think it's important to give something back. So that's my advertisement. That's your cost of attendance.
Good one. Thank you.
All right. And Perry, we did have a question in the chat box. They asked, what is CFRE? As well as any organization Perry belongs to, which website would be a good resource for the subject of this meeting?
Well, that's a good point. CFRE, I spent my life in the 2-year college world as the kind of a development director. So CFRE is a certified fundraising executive. So I have worked for decades in helping people leave legacies, but not as a financial planner. I have nothing to sell. So the cool thing is, I'm not like when you get invited to go to Eddie Merlot's for dinner. Hey, come for a free dinner and hear about that. I'm not going to try to sell you an annuity, but certified fundraising executive means I've worked in philanthropy all my pretty much 40 some odd years now, and there is a certification process, like a practice-based credential, kind of a CPA, if you will, of fundraising. So that's me. Websites that I recommend. Actually, I'll send some links back to Sean and POB. I think the mother lode is AARP. If you want to look into things about retiring and aging, join or not join, a lot of their stuff, like I said, is free online. And then there's 2 or 3 really good government websites, some for health, some for nutrition. I do a couple of seminars, and if you want, tell Sean you want to hear Perry talk more, and we can do some more about some of those other aspects of aging. And there's some really good sites that you pay for in the state of Indiana, and I can do some research if you want. Probably in the state of Maryland, Virginia has them too. State of Indiana, there are a number of forms that are already filled out that you can kind of plug in for things like a living will, things like a do not resuscitate order, a number of documents that have some legal bearing. And in the state of Indiana, we've already done them. They've passed through the legislature, so I can go download them for free, fill in the blanks, and have a number of those documents taken care of. So I would also check with your state Department of Aging. that would be a good place to start. But I'll send some more links to Sean, and he can share them maybe in the next newsletter, or you can reach out to him. Good question, though. The more you learn, the more you know.
Thanks, Perry.